Hi there, Year 7s. Yet again, we're going to have another video, and this time I'm going to talk to you about neutralization reactions. What you can see in this picture is actually a lake that's been affected by something called acid rain, and the lake itself is way too acidic for life. And what these people have done is that they're trying to spray an alkaline solution into this lake to try and get the acidity to go down, the pH to go up, and for it to be able to support life again. We're going to look at what neutralization is just now. So if you mix an acid and an alkali together, it will do a chemical reaction. And what happens is that the acid particles and the alkali particles react and effectively cancel each other out. They'll form water as one of their products, which, as you know, is completely neutral, but it will also form a salt of some description. That salt is also neutral. And so because we have an acid and an alkali mixing together to form something neutral, we call this kind of reaction a neutralization reaction. Now this can obviously be written as a chemical equation. All the things that react together, we put those on the left hand side of our reaction. So here we go, we've got acid plus alkali. Those are the two things that I would react. And all the things that we make, our products, those are on the right hand side of the reaction. And you can see that here I've written salt and water. Can you remember what the thing is that goes in the middle? It's an arrow. So we need to separate our reactants and our products by putting an arrow in the middle. So this is the general equation for a neutralization reaction. Please remember this, it's very important. It's acid plus alkali makes a salt plus water. Now, don't get confused by the term salt. In our everyday lives, salt is something very specific. It's that white stuff you put on your chips. But in chemistry, a salt is any chemical that is made from reacting an acid and an alkali together. There are many different kinds of salt based on what the chemicals you started with to make your salt. So we use a scientific naming structure in order to name our chemicals. The salt you add to food is actually called sodium chloride, and it's made by reacting sodium hydroxide with hydrochloric acid. Now, you will have to work out what salt you have made in chemical reactions. This sounds confusing, but it is very easy. If you used hydrochloric acid, your salt will have the final name chloride. If you used sulfuric acid, then your salt will end with the word sulfate. And whatever base you used, or whatever alkali you used, the name of the metal in that is the first name of the substance. That sounds confusing, but let's do an example and I'll show you what I mean. So, what compounds will I make if I react hydrochloric acid and calcium hydroxide? Well, I'm going to write this out. I've got hydrochloric acid plus calcium hydroxide. Obviously, we're going to put an arrow in to represent this as a chemical reaction. And I know that I'm always going to make water in one of these neutralization reactions. But what's the name of the salt that I'm going to make? Well, I have to use the first name from my alkali. That's calcium. And I have to use the changed name of the acid. I use hydrochloric acid, so the ending name is going to be chloride. So the answer is calcium chloride is what I'm going to make. You can see here that hydrochloric acid and calcium hydroxide, it's the hydrochloric and the calcium bit that are the ones that I'm looking for. And you can see where I've put those in my final product. The word calcium came from the calcium hydroxide, and the word chloride came from hydrochloric acid. Just remember, if you use hydrochloric acid, the end name should be chloride. If you use sulfuric acid, the salt will end with the word sulfate. Right. During a neutralization reaction, the pH of the solution is going to change as we start adding more and more alkali to the acid. So here's a beaker with some acid in, and I've added an indicator, and you can see it's turned a nice beautiful red colour. If I add some alkali to that, then that will change colour. It's still an acid, but it's slightly less acidic than it was, because some of the particles of the alkali have overtaken the particles of the acid, and it's become slightly more neutral. If I add more alkali still, eventually it will become neutral. At this point, the neutralization reaction has finished, and we can say we're done with this neutralization reaction. But what if I put in too much? If I put in some more alkali to that solution and test the pH again, then it would have become an alkali. This reaction has gone too far, and it has become an alkali, as you can see from the blue colour of the solution. Now, there are lots of uses for neutralization. I certainly don't just use it in the chemistry lab, although that is a very important part. Interestingly, farmers really need to know about pH, and they test their soil regularly, because certain crops will only grow in specific soil. So, if I wanted my crops to grow in an acidic soil, I could add an acid to the soil, like hydrochloric acid, to help them start to grow. If they can only grow in an alkaline substance, I could add a base like calcium carbonate or calcium hydroxide. That'd be a really good thing to use in the soil. As you saw before in our opening bit, we can prevent acid rain doing damage to lakes and rivers by adding an alkali to the river, and that means that it gets rid of the acid, and you end up with a neutral lake again. It's a good way of getting the acid out of the acid rain affected lake. Finally, if anyone here suffers from indigestion, that's actually a problem caused by having too much stomach acid. And because you've got too much stomach acid, it starts to burn the top of your stomach. Rennie tablets contain an alkali, and if you eat them, it will get rid of the excess acid in your stomach, and therefore that will neutralize the acid. Alright, thank you very much, guys. Have a good day.